outstandingly beautiful Loch Eck is in Argyll, 40 miles northwest of Glasgow in the Western Highlands. Long and slender, its ancient name literally means the Loch of Calamity. The Whistlefield Inn is just a stone's throw from the lochside. Set in a landscape of glens and mountains, it's difficult to imagine a more idyllic setting. The house detectives have been asked to solve the Whistlefields' many mysteries. We took the ferry across the Clyde to the Cowal Peninsula, where the inn's to be found. The Whistlefield is owned by Ray and Ian Smith. They bought the inn 4 years ago and moved up from their native Glasgow. Ray's a retired nursery school teacher, while Ian was an electrician.
We love coming to Whistlefield again and again.
And we pray for Whistlefield for its prosperity.
I believe this is the oldest inn in Argyll. We all play music, we have a thoroughly good time most weekends.
The inn is awash with legends of ghosts and murders.
And I looked over to the corner, and lo and behold, I saw a ghostly figure, and I've often wondered whether or not that was the ghost of the Baron Turner, who was murdered all that time ago.
The only spirits we ever seen was out that glass there, and they were good spirits, so we didn't worry about anything else.
Okay there, Matt? Yeah. Do you know you look like Lady Penelope driving this thing? Better than Parker, though. Yeah, no, Matt would do it.
Parker in the back.
It's a really lovely spot, isn't it? But it's kind of in the middle of nowhere.
Yes, you see Whistlefield on the map and you think it's a village, but there's nothing here.
This is about as vernacular as you can get. These dormers are typical of Highlands Scotland, and the whole front has been rendered in full sash lettering to make it look like stone, really posh stuff. I reckon there'll be some rough rubble underneath that.
Well, rough rubble, eh?
Rough rubble. I wonder what's inside.
Hopefully some alcohol.
This was to be our semi-retiro, the laugh of the century. And with no mains water, no central heating. It was very cold those first 2 years. But I fell in love with the view in the dining room. He fell in love with the view in the bar.
Not quite the bar. I just thought it was a very comfortable wee country pub, and you don't see a lot of them now. But
it felt cozy.
Yes, true, it is.
And what do you want us to find out for you?
I would really like to know the age of the building and also its location. I mean, we are miles from anywhere. There's no village round about it. So in years gone by, what would be the reason for people coming here? Why was it still an inn? And there is one other mystery I would love if you could solve for me. I've now had to sign 2 forms from the Ministry of Agriculture saying that I am prepared to turn the land over to animal husbandry in the event of a war.
And what are the stories you've heard about the Whistlefield?
I've heard numerous stories, we can't verify most of them. The first one we heard about was the secret tunnel that is supposed to run from the bar or the cellar down to the loch side. And the other one we gathered was a massacre. Some people say one person, others talk about hundreds.
Never had it authenticated, but this killing took place in the 17th century, and it was dubbed the Massacre of the Whistlefield. So.
If you would like to sample the atmosphere of the place, we have a gala later in the week, and you're certainly welcome to come along.
Oh, that's fantastic. I've never actually been to a ceilidh. It'd be brilliant.
The musicians are wonderful.
Ah, well, Mac, you're a bit of a drummer in your spare time.
I am. Yes.
Possibly. Could be your big break, Mac.
I think it's a break that I'll do without.
This was given to me by a customer, and he brought it in because he knew I was interested in the building, you know, and I was absolutely thrilled. these lovely things here.
Yes,
You know.
and these are finials set in the dormers here up in the roof. They're a very nice decorative feature, very typical of the 19th century. Lovely little point on the top there, isn't there? But I should think they probably got sort of weather-worn, rotted away a bit and were taken down, or maybe just were sort of unfashionable.
Yes, I mean, the finials have obviously gone now. It'd be great to put
Yes.
them back, wouldn't it?
Oh, it would be lovely. I mean, could you just imagine a bit like the icing on the cake? Oh, it'd be beautiful.
From the front, the Whistlefield looked simple enough, but from the side it revealed a much deeper building, extending back into 2 further ranges. It was clear to Mac that the whole of the back, including the inn's family room, was added much later. So he thought the bar at the front was the best place to start.
On the inside here, we can now see the stonework. On the outside it's all rendered over, but over there we've got the fireplace, where we can actually see the stone, this sort of great, very, very hard stone.
Hard is hard, that will not drill with a during drill.
It's called schist. It's layered rock, and it's all those beautiful colours. And because of the thickness of the wall here, it tells us that this must have been built before 1800. But another factor about this is that down at the bottom there is that doorway. It was once an external doorway. Of course, it now leads through to your family room. But just come and have a look at some of the stone there. Now, these are really beautiful stones here. These are coins, cornerstones. But the great thing is, this is 17th century.
Oh, that will settle a few arguments.
Ah, well done. Well done.
On cue for once.
Misspent youth, Mac.
Shall we stop on this moment of triumph?
You think? Actually, it's the view that's putting me off, Ray.
It is a lovely view from here. But I've always felt it wasn't quite as old as the rest of the inn, am I right?
Definitely. I mean, this was obviously added on probably late 19th century. I mean, it's very much that sort of period. If you look at the bay, that's a very much Edwardian look. And also this pine cladding was used a lot in the Western Highlands, because at this period normally you'd expect some nice plaster work, maybe a cornice with a ceiling rose, but here it was felt, and probably quite rightly, that it actually, because of the climatic conditions, that this helped, so it's very common here.
What about this window, Judith? I had a Dutchman in here who was a customer, and he told me that the window was Rennie Mackintosh.
Well, Charles Rennie Mackintosh, local designer made good from Glasgow, and of course his designs were so popular that they were copied a lot by local glassmakers at the time. And obviously his stuff is very well documented, so unfortunately I don't really think what we've got here is one by him. But they're beautiful. I mean, I think it's a very nice feature.
Yes,
in the
they're
room.
beautiful. In fact, it's been suggested that we protect them because the children play pool in here. And,
Yeah, I mean, never mind the children. I think with me playing pool in here, I mean, I
we'll
think
have
it's
them protected.
Ian's grandson, Daniel, wanted to show Mac the tunnel directly beneath the bar. Legend had it that it ran all the way to the side of the lock and was used to smuggle illegal booze into the Whistlefield. We sent Daniel in ahead, in true Victorian chimney sweep fashion. Uncle Mac! Daniel soon came to a dead end. Clearly, this wasn't a tunnel at all, but there was more to it than met the eye.
Have you found anything, Mike?
Well, yes. What I have discovered is that these two walls are not actually doing anything but supporting the floor above. So, indeed, this could have been created quite easily to hide things away, giving it a sort of the impression of a false wall.
So, the false wall could well have been put in to create a secret hiding place for illicit bottles of whiskey and wine. As soon as she was upstairs, Judith could see there'd been quite a lot of changes, including an astonishing decorative flourish in one of the bedrooms.
This is our architect's room. When we bought the place, the children dubbed this the Illickers Allsop room.
Why is that?
Because all these little fans were blue, pink and lilac. The windows were black, the door was black.
So why did you change it? Because I can see the Damon Historic Scotland will actually put a preservation order on this, because most people have got rid of it. But it's a very finely detailed example. Who did it?
Well, it was a gentleman, I believe, who had a fondness for the Uskabar, or whiskey, shall we say.
Well, this was obviously his whiskey period.
I would say so, yes.
what are you up to, Mac?
Well, you know, outside we established that there were 3 ranges to the house here. Well, these front 2 ranges are linked by this corridor, which was brought in the 19th century when the place was being modernised. And it actually cut through the roof line, which means that at an earlier time, these 2 rooms here, the only way you could have got to them is probably from a stepladder.
Why had the Whistlefield been modernised a century ago? The history of Dunoon, a ferry port 12 miles away, threw up a clue. The inn had been a favourite with Victorian trippers.
By the 19th century, Dunoon was a major tourist resort attracting thousands of visitors a year, and it was particularly fashionable with Victorian Glaswegians. Now, this is the official guide to the far-famed Loch Eck tour, which also takes in the Whistlefield Inn. And it reads here, all summer long, Dunoon is gay with a joyous crowd of holiday visitors for whom it supplies abundant amusement. The tour dates back to 1828, when the first iron steamer, the Aglaia, was launched on Loch Eck, later to be replaced by the Fairy Queen. At that time, the Whistlefield Inn described itself as a famous angling hostelry, and there's even a little advert in the back here.
What we wanted to find out now was who had done all the work on the inn. So Judith drove Ray to Dunoon to look through the documents which would provide the answers. At the town's Heritage Centre, they looked at census returns, valuation rolls and maps.
First of all, we want to find out if it's part of an estate, because that can tell us a lot about the property. And we find that it is part of an estate in this valuation roll. We'll check it. Here we are, Archibald Douglas of Glenfinnet, and we find a James Taylor.
Oh, yes.
Now, have you heard,
I've heard
the name Taylor?
Yes.
Well, we go then to the census returns to find out if we can see Taylor, and here we are. The census return of 1851, we find James Taylor, and this is the first time we see this, he's a farmer of 5 acres and an innkeeper. Now this is exciting because this is the first time we've got that it's not just an inn, Whistlefield, you're farming there too.
Yes, so that would explain why I always have to sign this document saying I have animals.
Exactly. So Whistlefield at this stage would offer accommodation and food, but also, which is quite interesting in this, is you've got 3 masons there at the time. So obviously there was building work. But in another census return, we find his son, Donald Taylor. He's really gone up market a bit because he's a hotel keeper and he's got 700 acres of hill pasture.
Well, he has gone up in the world.
Certainly has. I mean, this is quite a good establishment now, and he's got 2 servants.
It's a pity I don't know.
Yeah, and the money.
And the money.
So we see that, very, very well-established hotel now, not just an inn. Now that ties in very nicely with what we found out about the extension.
So he would probably be the gentleman that would have put those beautiful finials up.
Exactly. I mean, he was obviously wanting to make the Whistlefield look even more beautiful.
Oh, it's marvellous. Have you found anything about the massacre of the Whistlefield? Something that fascinates me.
Yes. Well, I've been through all these documents, and so far we can't find anything at all. No mention whatsoever. I mean, I don't know whether that's good or bad. Yes. At the moment, I mean, we're still doing our research, but we have got a little bit of a problem. We found a lovely old map of 1751, and where we would expect to find Whistlefield mentioned, all we can find here is Noch Blair, which in Gaelic means Blair's Mound. And from that, you might suppose there wasn't even a building there, it's just a mound.
Oh, that's very disappointing.
It is, isn't it?
So the 1751 map, with no sign of the Whistlefield, suggested the inn was much more modern than we thought. On the way back, we stopped off at Kilmun Parish Church to visit a memorial to the Douglas family, who were the local lairds. Could James Taylor be buried here too?
Well, I'm going to snoop round and see what I can find out here. See you in a bit.
The Douglases were a very, very important family in Scotland way back. And in their crest you see the heart of Robert the Bruce, because one of the Douglases actually by legend took the heart to the Holy Land for burial.
Hey you two, come and have a look at this! Here, look what I found. John Blair, late farmer in Whistlefield, who died January the 1st, 1768.
1760. Now that solves the mystery of the map from 1751, because we worried maybe there wasn't even a structure there. But this says, no, it was called Knock Blair. Yes, that's right, because he lived there. That's the same
Mr. Blair's Knock Blair.
Mr. Blair, yes. So his mound was actually the house, so we know that Whistlefield was actually there from that date.
Oh, lovely.
At least we'd managed to trace the Whistlefield back to the 18th century, but what would it have looked like then? We discovered there was a picture in Edinburgh of the inn from the days before it was modernised, and we arranged for it to be brought to the Whistlefield.
I'm glad to say we've been able to find a couple of pictures of Whistlefield, which hopefully you'll be interested in, and they're quite early, which is nice. Now, this is a sketchbook. It's James Murray's sketchbook. He was a teacher of drawing in Edinburgh in 1834.
Beautiful writing.
It's lovely, isn't it?
164 years ago, isn't it? Absolutely terrific, what a marvellous find. The lock in the foreground here, and then there's our house. And we see it unadorned, quite a simple structure in the building, a longhouse, a type of building that goes back to the Viking period. And there's no, of course, dormers, no additions to it. This is the basic unit as it was.
It's absolutely splendid.
Well, here's certainly the proof of it.
A Whistlefield regular, Bill Latham, offered to take Mac to a village of ruined longhouses high above nearby Loch Fyne. The tumble-down structures showed exactly how the walls of the Whistlefield were built.
Great wall, this, isn't it? This really is a super example. Dry stone walling, marvellous.
Yep.
Well, they built two walls which come rising up here. It would be hollow in the middle, and this would be filled, and if we move the moss, we can see the rubble that's in it here, and you tie the whole thing together with these stones along
That's
here.
right, that's a tie stain. And it's joined the two outer walls together. It just held them there.
Right. And this makes up a longhouse.
Yes.
It's pretty obvious why they're called longhouses when you look at these dimensions, isn't it?
It is indeed.
A really good example of the origins of your house, Whistlefield Inn. Believe it or not, this would have had the thatch roof using turf or grasses or whatever as a structure here. So what actually happened?
Well, this is a classic example of this village and lots more like it in throughout Scotland. We had what's called the Highland clearances. In the early 1800s, they brought in sheep and cleared the people. England didn't have much farmland, and we had lots of it up here. It was more profitable to breed sheep than men. So people were moved off their land, some were moved down to the shores, some were just deported. It really was a disaster for the people that lived in these areas.
Ironically, at the same time that people were being forced out of their homes, the Highlands were being romanticised by poets and artists from south of the border. The Whistlefield can just be picked out on this 1837 engraving of Loch Eck. The artist's idealised vision was a far cry from what it was really like.
At the end of the 18th century, the beginning of the 19th century, this was a very popular area for writers and poets, and they all had this great romantic idea of coming up to the Highlands, but they got a bit of a shock when they came here, and unfortunately the inns they found not quite to their liking. The writer Thomas Campbell wrote in 1795 that it was not over safe to lay yourself down in a Highland bed without being troubled by cutaneous or itching sensations next morning. So my companion and I slept all night on chairs by the side of a peat fire.
Whoops.
Yes, the English seeing.
Yes.
But they offered quite, obviously basic accommodation and food. He actually says here that when you came to an inn, the only bill of fare announced was scatanagus, spuntatagus and ushkabar, which is to say herrings and potatoes and whiskey. So just pretty much what we've got tonight.
And this looks very palatable as well. But there was in fact a poor write-up, I'm afraid, by an Englishman, a member of Parliament, who was visiting this area in 1873, and he had the rather remarkable name of Pisistratus Brown. Sounds as if he was a drunken cloud. And he actually wrote about it that by the side of the lonely lake we came to a rude little inn.
and we hob and nobbed over a trifle of honest Lagavulin whisky that had the look of peat reek and moss water about its soft yellow hue.
Well, he had good taste in his whisky, and not so silly, even though he was an MP.
Slangiver.
Ray was disappointed by the harsh words about the Whistlefield and preferred the inn's image in its Victorian heyday. So first thing the following day, we called in the builders. It was to be a surprise. We knew that before the Whistlefield became a smart hotel, it was a farm as well as an inn. But if it was so rough and ready, who would have gone there to eat herring and potatoes? Now, Betty, we've been trying to find out who might have used the inn before tourism came to the area. Have you got any idea who might have gone there?
Yes, it's on the main west route between the west and the centre of Scotland, and you would have certainly the drovers coming through in great numbers, as well as travellers of all descriptions.
Drovers? What are drovers?
The people bringing the cattle from the west and the north through to the trysts, big markets where they were exchanged, and then from there they walked right down eventually to Smithfield in London.
So our inn was a drover's inn?
It would be.
Basically.
It would be a drover's inn. Although the men who were doing the driving probably didn't sleep in the inn.
Right.
They would sleep in the open air. Imagine it in this weather.
They'd be sleeping outside with their cattle?
They'd sleep in the open air with the cattle. They had to look after their cattle because the cattle were valuable and could be stolen.
It sounds a bit like these guys were sort of the cowboys of the Highlands.
Well, I don't like the connection. I think our people were much slower moving, quieter moving, instead of this rushing around on horseback.
And the cattle that they used to bring down, was it this sort of creature?
They would be more like these black cattle of the Highlands, the Kylos. Nothing at all like the Highland cattle that people picture in the Highlands, which are really a later incoming group.
Do you like my cattle disguise, Betty? I feel a bit like one of those, really. I was told the drovers brought their cattle across Loch Eck at the Whistlefield on their journey southwards to market. Bill wanted to show me evidence of this on the far side of the loch. So, Bill, are there any monsters in this loch?
Oh, aye, this is Loch Eck. It's the Loch of Doom.
The Loch of Doom? Why is it called the Loch of Doom?
There's many a boat, person, rod, hook, line and sinker vanished without trace.
No, you're joking.
No.
I don't believe that Loch Eck does have a monster then.
No, I don't think it has.
Good. So why is the Whistlefield called the Whistlefield? Do you know?
The drovers used to drive across from the Whistlefield across the other side. They would come into the peninsula and whistle for the ferryman who lived on the other side of the loch.
Oh, to get the ferryman to send out the boat.
Catch his attention, and he would come over, and he was a rover, of course. And he'd pick the drovers up, drive them, take them over to the
And how would the cattle get across? Presumably, right, so the drovers would go on the boat.
Mm-hmm. And quite often they'd have a lead beast, and he would have him a rope around his horns, and they would lead that in, and the rest of the beast would follow. And the other drovers behind driving them in, but they would just swim. Quite used to it.
That's fantastic. Land! And there it was, the ruins of the ferryman's cottage.
Well, this looks like it.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Aye. Well, this is in the same area. It lines up with the map. It lines up with the Whistlefield.
How would it have looked, Bill, when it was intact?
Well, it'd be sort of what we call it turf, but it'd be a thatch roof. There'd be a hole in the roof for a chimney and a firewood in the middle. They would be sitting round with their pipes, covered in smoke and peat, dust, and generally grubby.
You can get a feeling, actually,
here.
of the drovers and all their cattle and the ferryman.
Be cosy.
It would be very cosy.
You'd be very, very cosy. You have to be a good friend.
Well, the moment of truth.
Uh-huh.
So, what do you think?
Oh, they're beautiful. Oh, they're lovely.
How do you like that?
Don't you think it just gives gives it something back.
It
really
sets the building up beautifully.
It enhances
It really
it.
does.
It really does. They're lovely.
Magnificent.
They really are lovely.
So I think the tailors in the 19th century had a pretty good idea for what to do to Whistlefield.
Would they have approved of me, do you
I
think?
think they would.
But I always said, thought that you don't own a building as old as this. You're just a custodian. And if you can improve it, have I been a good custodian, would you say?
You certainly have. I think they look
Oh,
fantastic.
they're beautiful. They really are beautiful.
They're absolutely magnificent, aren't they?
Elegant's the word.
It's exciting.
Great.
It's another wee bit painting, of course.
Don't remind me of that.
Just you to think of that. Just you to think of that.
But one big question remained. Was the story of a massacre at the Whistlefield just a myth? Old locals told us of a Baron Turner who was murdered 300 years ago and haunts the inn to this day. Valuation rolls indeed proved that a man called Turner was living at Cowal, just a couple of miles away in the late 17th century. And then we found a reference to his murder in 1686. Turner set off one moonlit evening for a ball at the Whistlefield. Tall and powerful, he was said to be a fit match for 2 or 3 assailants. But these were violent times in Argyll, and a follower of the rampaging Duke of Atholl was lying in wait. On news of the Baron's death, the ball quickly became awake. But Turner's friends avenged him by slaying his killer in front of the inn. Ever since, these killings have been known as the Whistlefield Massacre. Mystery solved, it was time to celebrate with a traditional ceilidh, Whistlefield style.
Has it made you look at the Whistlefield in a different way?
Very much so. When we first came to this inn, we were really excited. It was, the enthusiasm was boundless. And it got a bit flagged recently. But now I am determined that we will go on improving it.
And maybe a drover's feast on the menu?
Yes, someone approached me today and told me that they can deliver herring to me on a Thursday from the market. So yes, we will have it. I think the drover's meal will go on the menu. And I think it should prove quite popular.
And what about you, Ian?
I found it brilliant. The whole thing was smashing. It was great to discover so many things that I hadn't known about before. The tunnel is still slightly a mystery, but Baron Turner was a fact.
I'm so pleased that the Baron Turner has come back from the dead.
And he'll tell you this much, he dances a mean Highland fling.
I think I'll approach him later.
And I'll approach you later.
Oh, very good. I look forward to that, Ian.
Now, Judith, you have to take care. He's getting old.
Am I going to remember the gay gardens?
Tonight, I think you'll never forget the Whistlefield.